Greetings, everyone. Yes, I am back. It's been a while, but here is at least chapter 12 and possibly chapter 13 of The Yearling by Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings. So, here we go. Chapter 12. Jody heard the freight and passenger steamer pass, the Hutto landing about daylight. He sat up in bed and looked out of the window. The lights of the steamer were pale under the early morning sky. The paddle wheels churned thickly through the water. The steamer blew its thin, high whistle in Volusia. He thought he heard it stop and then go on up the river. Somehow its passing concerned him. He could not go to sleep again. Outside in the yard, old Julia growled. Penny stirred from his sleep. Watchfulness lives sentinel in his blunt. Bleh. Hang on, let me do that one again. Watchfulness lives sentinel in his brain. Sounds no heavier than the wind around him. He said, "The steamer stopped. Somebody's coming." Old Julia barked deeply, then whined and was still. "It's somebody she knows," Jody cried. "It's Oliver," and jumped from the bed. He ran naked through the cottage. Fluff awakened and dashed from his bed by Grandma's door, barking shrilly. A voice shouted, "Turn out, you lazy landlubbers!" Grandma ran from her bedroom. She had on a long white nightgown and a white nightcap. She fastened a shawl around her shoulders as she ran. Oliver took the steps in one bound like a buck, and Jody and his mother were on him in a whirlwind. He lifted his mother by the waist and swung her. She thumped him with her small fists. Jody and Fluff yelped for attention. Oliver swung them in turn. Penny joined them sedately, fully dressed. They pumped hands in greeting. In the dim light of dawn, Oliver's teeth flashed white. One moment. Oliver's teeth flashed white. Grandma's eye caught another flashing. "Now you just give me them earbobs, you pirate!" She stood on tiptoe to reach up to his ears. Gold hoops swung from the lobes. She unscrewed them and put them in her own ears. He laughed and shook her, and Fluff barked in a frenzy. In the tumult, Penny spoke. "Lord save us, Jody, you're plumb naked." Jody froze in his tracks. He turned to run. Oliver caught him. Grandma pulled the shawl from her shoulders and tied it around his waist. She said, "I'd have run naked too if I'd had to. Oliver don't come home but twice a year, do he, boy?" He said, "It was dark when I set out anyways." The commotion quieted. Oliver picked up his duffel bag and carried it inside. Jody trailed him. "Where you been to this time, Oliver? Did you see whales?" Penny said, "Leave the man catch his breath, Jody. He can't turn out tales for young'uns like a spring turns water." But Oliver was bursting with his tales. "That's what a sailor comes home for," he said, "to see his ma and his gal and to tell lies." His ship had been in the tropics. Jody tore himself away long enough to slip into his borrowed shirt and breeches. He called questions and Grandma called questions. The homecomer answered back and forth. Grandma dressed in a flowery dimity and arranged her silver curls with special care. She went to the kitchen to start breakfast. Oliver opened the mouth of his duffel bag and dumped the contents in the middle of the floor. Grandma said, "I can't look and cook at the same time." Oliver said, "Then for Lord's sake, Ma, cook." "You're thin." "I'm skin and bones waiting to get home to eat." "Jody, come get that fire to roaring. Slice that ham. Slice that bacon. Slice that venison." She took bowls from cupboards, beat eggs and batter. Jody helped her, then ran back to Oliver. The sun rose and flooded the cottage. Oliver and Penny and Jody squatted on their haunches over the contents of the duffel bag. Oliver said, "I've got something for everybody but Jody." Honey, I forgot him. You didn't. You ain't never yet forgot me. See, can you pick out your present? Jody passed over a roll of silk. That was, of course, for Grandma. He pushed aside Oliver's clothes, spiced and musty with strange foreign odors. A small packet was wrapped in flannel. Oliver took it out of his hands. That's for my gal. A loose sack was filled with agates and translucent stones. Jody passed on. He lifted a parcel to his nose. Tobacco for your pa from Turkey. Why, Oliver, Penny opened it, marveling. The rich aroma drifted across the room. Why, Oliver, I can't remember when I've had me a present. Jody pinched a long, narrow bundle. It was heavy and metallic. This is it. You can't tell without seeing it. Jody unwrapped the bundle madly. A hunting knife fell to the floor. The blade was keen and shining. Jody stared. Not a knife, Oliver. Now, if you'd rather have one of them ground down files like your pa has, Jody pounced. He swung the long blade to catch the light. There ain't nobody in the scrub, he said, has got sich as that. Not even the Forsters has got sich a knife. That's what I figured. We can't let them Blackbeards go ahead of us. Jody looked at the small flannel swathed parcel Oliver held in one hand. He was torn between Oliver and the Forsters. He burst out. Oliver, Lem Forster says Twink Weatherby is his gal. Oliver laughed and tossed the parcel from one hand to the other. He said, No Forster ever told the truth. Nobody takes my gal away from me. Jody felt a wave of relief. He had told both Grandma and Oliver and washed his conscience clear, and Oliver was not disturbed. Then a memory came to him of Lem's dark face, brooding and sullen, as he scraped the strings of his fiddle. He put the picture from him. He sunk himself in the treasures his friend had brought home from far places across the sea. Grandma, he noticed, did not touch her plate at breakfast. She kept Oliver's filled. Her bright eyes hovered over her son like hungry swallows. Oliver sat tall and straight at the table. His skin was bronzed where his shirt was open over his lean throat. His hair was sunburned with a red light in it. His eyes were the color which Jody imagined was the color of the sea, gray-blue with a flashing of green. Jody ran his hand over his own snub nose and freckled skin. He felt surreptitiously across the back of his head, where the straw-colored drake's tail stuck out stiffly. He was immensely dissatisfied with himself. He asked, Grandma, was Oliver born good-looking? Penny said, I can answer that. I can remember when he was uglier than you and me both. Oliver said complacently, You'll grow up handsome, as I am, Jody, if that's what's bothering you. Just as handsome to do, he said. Oliver said, I'll call you in to tell that to my gal today. Grandma wrinkled her nose. Sailors belong to do their courting before they come home, she said. From what I hear, Penny offered, sailors don't never quit courting. How about you, Jody? Oliver asked. You got a sweetheart yet? Penny said, Why ain't you here? Oliver, Jody's sweet on Eulalie Boyles. Jody felt a murderous fury creep over him. He wanted to roar like the Foresters and frighten everyone with his rage. He stuttered. I hate girls. I hate Eulalie most of all. Oliver said innocently, Why, what's the matter with her? I hate her old twitchy nose. She looks like a rabbit." Oliver and Penny shouted and slapped each other. Grandma said, "Now quit tormenting the boy, both of you. Can't you remember that fur back yourselves?" His venom melted under his gratitude to her. Grandma was the only one who ever stood up for him. No, he thought, that was not true. Penny himself usually helped him fight his battles. When his mother was unreasonable, Penny always said, "Leave him be, Ori." Or remember when I were a boy. It came to him that his father only teased him here in the hands of friends. When he needed help, Penny never failed him. He grinned. He said to his father, "I just dare you to tell Ma I got a gal. She'd rare worsen if I had me a varmint. She'd rare worsen if I had me a varmint. Lord of mercy." Grandma said, "Your ma rares at you, do she?" "At me and Pa. Worst at Pa." "She don't appreciate him," she said. "She just don't know any better." She sighed. "A woman has got to love a bad man once or twice in her life to be thankful for a good one." Penny stared modestly at the floor. Jody was consumed with curiosity as to whether Mr. Hutto had been good or bad. He dared not ask. At any rate, Mr. Hutto had been long dead, that he supposed it no longer mattered. Oliver rose and stretched his long legs. Grandma said, "You leaving me the very minute you get home?" "Just for a little while. I got to go round and get acquainted in the neighborhood again." "That little yellow-headed Twink, eh?" "Sure." He leaned over her and tousled her curls. "Penny, you all ain't going home today." "We got to do our trading and head for the scrub, Oliver. I hate it. I hate to miss the Saturday frolic. We come on a Friday so's to get our venison to boils in time for the north boat today. And 'tain't right to leave Ori alone too long." "No," Grandma said. "A panther might get her." Penny looked at her quickly, but she was arranging the folds of her apron with great care. Oliver said, "Well, see you to the river." He was gone, slapping his sailor's cap on the back of his head. His whistle sounded after him. Jody was desolate. Something would happen to keep him from hearing Oliver's tales. He could feel it. He would have liked to sit on the river bank all morning while Oliver yarned. He had never had enough. Oliver told a tale or two, and someone came, or Oliver stopped to do something else and never finished. "I ain't never yet had me a bait of stories," he said. Grandma said, "I've never had him long enough neither." Penny loitered over his leaving. "I hate to leave," he said, "particular now Oliver's here." "I miss Oliver worse," she said, "when he's here and away from me than when he's at sea." Jody said, "Hits Twink. Hits gals, does it? I don't never aim to have no gal." He was resentful of Oliver's leaving them. The four of them made a close community, and Oliver had torn it to tatters. Penny basked in the peace of the cottage. He filled his pipe again and again with the foreign tobacco. He said, "I do hate it, but we got to go. We got our trading to do, and it's a fur piece home afoot." Jody walked along the river bank and threw sticks for Fluff. He saw Easy Ozell running toward the cottage. Easy called, "Get your pa quick. Don't let Miss Hutto hear." Jody ran through the garden and called his father. Penny came outside. Easy panted, "Oliver's fighting the Forresters. He took a crack at Lem outside the store, and all them fighting Forresters come down on him. They're killing him." Penny ran for the store. Jody could not keep up with him. Easy trailed behind both of them. Penny called over her shoulder, "I hope we can settle it before Grandpa gets into it with a gun." Jody called, "Pa, we fighting for Oliver?" We're fighting for whoever's taking a licking, and that's Oliver." Jody's brain whirled like a windmill. He said, "Pa, you said no man couldn't live on Baxter's Island without the Forresters was his friends." "I said so, but I ain't going to see Oliver hurt." Jody was numb. It seemed to him that Oliver deserved his punishment. He had gone away and left them to see a girl. He was almost glad the Forresters were after him. Perhaps Oliver would come home from the fight and be done with his nonsense. Twink Weatherby. Jody spat into the sand. He thought of Fodderwing. He could not bear never to be friends with him again. He called to his father's back, "I ain't gonna fight for Oliver." Penny did not answer. His short legs churned. The fight was in the sandy road in front of the Boyles' store. A cloud of dust rose ahead, like a whirlwind in the heat of summer. Jody heard the shouting of the watchers before he could make out the figures of the fighters. All of Volusia was there. Penny panted, "That white possum crowd don't care who's killed, long as they get to see a fight." Jody saw Twink Weatherby on the outer circle. Men and women all called her pretty, but he wanted to tear out her soft yellow curls, one by one. Her small pointed face was white. Her wide blue eyes were fixed on the fighters. She twisted a handkerchief around and around in her fingers. Penny pushed his way through the crowd. Jody followed behind him. He clutched at his father's shirt. It was true. The Forresters were killing Oliver. Oliver was fighting 3 of them at once, Lem and Mill Wheel and Buck. He looked like a buck deer Jody had once seen, wounded and bleeding, with the dogs tearing flesh from its throat and shoulders. Blood and sand covered his face. He was boxing warily, trying to take on one Forrester at a time. Lem and Buck rushed in on him together. Jody heard a heavy fist crack against bone. Oliver dropped in the sand. The crowd roared. Jody's mind whirled in confusion. Oliver deserved it for leaving the cottage and going into a girl, but 3 against 1 was never fair. Even when the dogs bayed a bear or panther, it seemed to him an uneven matter. The Forresters, his mother said, were black-hearted. He had never believed her. They sang and drank and frolicked and guffawed. They fed him lavishly and slapped him on the back and gave him Fodderwing to play with. Was this black-hearted for 3 to fight against one another? To fight together against one? Yet Millwheel and Buck were fighting for Lem, keeping his girl for him. Was not that good? Was that not loyal? Oliver came to his knees, then wavered to his feet. He smiled through the dirt and blood. Jody's stomach turned over. Oliver was being killed. Jody jumped on Lem's back. He clawed at his neck and thumped his head. Lem shook him off and turned and sent him sprawling. His face stung from the impact of the big hand. His hip ached from the fall. Lem snapped, "You keep at'n this, you leetle panther." Penny called loudly, "Who's judging this fight?" Lem said, "We're judging it." Penny pushed in front of him. His voice was high against the shouting. If it take 3 men to whop one, I say that one is the better man. Lem advanced on him. He said, "I'm a no mind to kill you, Penny Baxter, but I'll smack you flat as a skeeter if you don't get out of my way." Penny said, "Fair is fair. If you aim to kill Oliver, shoot him honest and hang him for murder. But be men." Buck shuffled his feet in the sand. He said, "We'd have fit him one at a time, but he lit right in." Penny pressed his advantage. "Whose fight is it? Who done what to who?" Lem said, "He come back stealing, that's what he done." Oliver wiped his sleeve across his face. He said, "It's Lem that tried to steal." "Steal what?" Penny pounded one fist inside the other. Hounds, hogs, guns, or hosses? On the outer rim, Twink Weatherby began to cry. Oliver said in a low voice, "This is no place to tell it, Penny." Then be this the place to fight it out? Like a pack of dogs fighting in the road? You two fellers fight it out alone another day. Oliver said, "I'll fight a man anywhere that says what Lem said." Lem said, "And I'll say it again." They started together. Penny pushed between them. He seemed to Jody like a small, stout pine tree bending against a hurricane. The crowd roared. Lem drew back his fist and struck Oliver over Penny's head. The blow sounded like the crack of a rifle. Oliver crumpled like a rag doll to the sand and lay still. Penny brought his knuckles under Lem's jaw. Buck and Millwheel came at him from the sides. Lem sunk his fist in Penny's ribs. Jody moved with a fury that caught him up from the outside like a strong wind. He sunk his teeth into Lem's wrist. He kicked the big shins. Lem churned like a bear annoyed by a puppy. He knocked Jody clear of his feet. It seemed to him that Lem struck him again in midair. He saw Oliver sway to his feet. He saw Penny's arms swinging like flails. He heard a roaring. It was close at first, and then it faded. He dropped into blackness. Chapter 13. Oh my. Jody thought, "I dreamed the fighting." He stared at the ceiling in Grandma Hutto's spare bedroom. A freight steamer was thrashing upstream. He heard the side wheel paddles drinking the drift current of the river. They gulped great wet mouthfuls and let it spill out again. The steamer blew for the Volusia landing. He must certainly have only now wakened in the morning. The steamer's chugging filled the riverbed and beat against the western wall that was the scrub. He had had a nightmare about Oliver Hutto coming home to fight the Foresters. He turned his head to look out of the window and watch the passing vessel. A sharp pain shot through his neck and shoulder. He could only turn his head part way. Memory went through him, thrusting like the pain. He thought, the fighting was true. It was afternoon. The sun shone in the west across the river. A bright band lay across the counterpane. The pain stopped, but he felt faint and dizzy. There was movement in the room. A rocker creaked. Grandma Hutto said, "His eyes are open." He tried to turn his head toward her voice, but could not without pain. She leaned over him. He said, "Hey, Grandma." She spoke not to him, but to his father. "He's as tough as you. He's all right." Penny appeared on the other side of the bed. One wrist was bandaged and one eye was black. He grinned at Jody. He said, "We was a big help, you and me." A cold, wet cloth slipped from Jody's forehead. Grandma took it away and laid her hand in its place. She reached her fingers back of his head and felt carefully for the source of the pain. It was in his left jaw where Lem had struck him, and in the back of his head where he had hit the sand. It eased under her slow manipulation. She said, "Say something so I'll know your brains ain't jellied." "I can't think of nothing to say," he added. "It ain't past dinner time." Penny said, "The only serious hurt could come to him as likely as belly." He said, "I ain't hungry. I just seed the sun and I was wondering." She said, "That's all right, Pumpkin." He asked, "Where's Oliver?" "In the bed." "Is he bad hurted?" "Not bad enough to learn him sense." "I don't know now," Penny said. "One more clip and he'd not have had much left to learn with. Anyway, he spoiled his pretty looks, so no yellow-headed thing'll look at him for a while." "You women is right smart hard on one another," Penny said. Seems to me 'twas Oliver and Lem done most of the looking." Grandma rolled up the cold cloth and left the bedroom. Penny said, "'Twain't nowadays no ways fair getting a young'un knocked dead, but I'm proud you was man enough to mix in it when you seed a friend in trouble." Jody stared at the sunlight. He thought, "The Forsters are my friends, too." As though he read his thoughts, Penny said, "This'll likely end neighboring with the Forsters." A twinge of pain shot from Jody's head into the pit of his stomach. He could not give up Fodderwing from the bushes. He decided that he would slip away from sometime and call to Fodderwing from the bushes. He pictured the secret meeting. Perhaps they would be discovered, and Lem would whip them both to death. Then Oliver would be sorry he had fought because of Twink Weatherby. Jody was more resentful at Oliver than at the Forsters. Something of Oliver that had belonged to him and to Grandma had been taken away and given to the yellow-headed girl who wrung her hands over the fighting. Yet, if he had it to do over again, he would still have to help Oliver. He recalled a wildcat that the dogs had torn to pieces. Wildcats deserved what they got. Yet at one moment, when the snarling mouth had gaped wide in agony and the evil eyes had filmed in dying, he had been stabbed with pity. He had cried out, longing to help the creature in its torture. Too much pain was unjust. Too many against one were unjust. That was why it had been necessary to fight for Oliver, even if it lost him Fodderwing. He closed his eyes, satisfied. Everything was all right when he understood it. Grandma came into the bedroom with a tray. "Now, Pumpkin, see, can you sit up?" Penny slipped his hands under the pillow, and Jody eased up slowly. He was stiff and sore, but he felt no worse than the time he had fallen out of the chinaberry tree. Penny said, "I wished poor Oliver had got off this light." Grandma said, "He's lucky he didn't get his fine nose broke." He ate his way painfully toward a plate of gingerbread. Because of the soreness, he was forced to leave a square. He looked at it. Grandma said, "I'll save that for you." Penny said, "Ain't it a treat to have a woman read your mind and then agrees with it?" "I mean." Jody lay against his pillow. Violence broke into peace and tore the world to tatters, and then, suddenly, all was peaceful again. Penny said, "I got to be pushing on, or he'll be raring." He stood in the doorway. He was a little stooped. He looked lonely. Jody said, "I want to go with you." Penny's face grew bright. He said, "Now, boy." He was eager. "You sure you're fitting? Tell you what I'll do. Barry Boyle's old mare, and the one goes home alone. We'll ride her back and turn her loose." Barry, sorry. Let me do that again. He said, "Now, boy." He was eager. "You sure you're fitting? Tell you what I'll do. Barry Boyle's his old mare, the one goes home alone. We'll ride her back and turn her loose." Grandma said, "Or I'll feel better about him if he goes with you. I know what happens to Oliver where I can see him. Ain't near as bad as what happens out of my sight." Jody eased his body from the bed. He was dizzy. His head felt large and full. He was tempted to sink back on the smooth sheets. Penny said, "Jody's a man, if I do say it." He straightened and went to the door. "Must I say goodbye to Oliver?" "Why, sure, but don't let on how bad he looks. He's proud." He went to Oliver's room. Oliver's eyes were swollen shut, as though he had fallen in a nest of wasps. One cheek was purple. A white bandage was tied around his head. His lips were puffed. The fine sailor was laid low, and all because of Twink Weatherby. Jody said, "Goodbye, Oliver." Oliver did not answer. Jody softened. I'm sorry Pa and me didn't get there quicker, Oliver said. Come here. Jody went close to the bed. You do something for me. Go tell Twink I'll be sure to Oak Grove Tuesday, 'bout dusk dark. Jody was frozen. He burst out. I won't do it. I hate her. Oh, yellow-headed something. All right. I'll send easy. Jody scuffled the rug with one foot. Oliver said, Thought you was my friend. Being friends, he thought, was a nuisance. Then he remembered the hunting knife and was filled with gratitude and shame. Well, all right. I don't want to, but I'll tell her. Oliver laughed from the bed. He would laugh, Jody thought, if he lay dying. Goodbye, Oliver. Goodbye, Jody. He left the room. Grandma was waiting. He said, Come out kind of disappointing, didn't it, Grandma? Oliver fighting and all. Penny said, Boy, be civil. Grandma said, The truth's civil enough. When bears with sore heads go courting, there's always trouble, as long as this is the end and not the beginning. Penny said, You know where to send for me. They went down the path through the garden. Jody looked back over his shoulder. Grandma stood waving after them. Penny stopped at Boyle's store for his supplies and for his 4-quarter venison. Boyles was willing to lend the mare if Penny would strap a length of good buckskin for bootlaces on the saddle when he sent her home in payment. The supplies, flour and coffee and powder and lead and shell cases for the new gun were dropped in a sack. Boyles went to his lot and brought out the mare, saddled with a blanket. Don't turn her loose till morning, he said. She can outrun a wolf, but I wouldn't want a panther dropping on her. Penny turned away to lift his sacks. Jody sidled close to the storekeeper. He was reluctant to have his father know Oliver's secret. He whispered, I got to see Twink Weatherby. Where does she live? What do you want of her? I got something to say to her, Boyle said. A heap of us have something to say to her. Well, you'll have to bide your time. The young lady's put a kerchief on her yellow curls and slipped off on the freight boat to Sanford. Whew. Jody felt a satisfaction as great as though he had driven her away himself. He borrowed a piece of paper and a thick pencil and printed a note to Oliver. It was laborious work, for his father's teachings had been supplemented only by the one brief winter of instruction from the itinerant school teacher. He wrote, Dear Oliver, your old Twink has done goed up the river. I'm glad. Your friend Jody. He read it over. He decided in favor of a greater kindness. He crossed out, I'm glad, and wrote in its place, I'm sorry. He felt virtuous. Something of the old glow for Oliver came back to him. Perhaps he could still hear his tales. Crossing to the scrub on the side of the ferry, he stared down into the swift river. His thoughts were as turbulent as the current. Oliver had never failed him before. The Foresters were, after all, as rough as his mother insisted. He felt deserted, but he was sure Fodderwing would not change. The gentle mind in the twisted body would be as aloof from the quarrel as his own. His father, of course, stood as unchangeable as the earth. And that is the end of chapters 12 and 13. I will see you next time, and until then, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and grant you his peace.